What's up, everybody? Tom Pelissero here with Judd Zulgad, who I'm going to allow to speak a lot in this video.
Thank you very much.
The popular opinion is that I speak too much, apparently, in the video.
The retired people don't like you.
All right, so Judd, let's talk about the Minnesota Vikings here now.
Yep.
3 days before the preseason finale. We're about 2 weeks before the regular season opener. Continuing to see the bumps and bruises kind of add up for this football team, particularly at cornerback and at linebacker.
Yeah, at cornerback, if you look at this, Tom, Asher Allen's been out since mid-August. Now they've lost, what? Torrance is out. Chris Cook is not going to play because of a hamstring that we're told is no problem. But with Chris Cook, you know what?
Don't know.
If he's hurt, it's a real problem. So we talked about this a little bit last week. The injuries did start to add up, but this team is pretty banged up. And what's interesting is they're even making some moves because they're so banged up.
Moving Everson Griffen to outside linebacker, which is interesting because you always hear...
It's really interesting.
And talking to scouts, you'll hear them say, well, you know, guys who are looked at as 3-4 outside linebacker prospects, that maybe even some 4-3 teams might just put a guy in there. A scout told me that about DeAndre Reed after the draft. Maybe they'd look at him there. But with Griffen, he weighs 273 pounds. He's a big guy. We know he's a speed rusher. We know that he's got great straight line speed. But how often can you drop Everson Griffen into coverage and get away from it, which is part of playing weak side linebacker? I got the feeling it's going to be specific packages is really what they want to see if he can do.
It's got to be, Tom. And if you think about it, you know what, 3-4 teams, as you mentioned, this would be no big deal. We cover it, it'd be interesting, but we dismiss it pretty quickly. This is a big deal to me. This is a 4-3 team that has moved a lineman to linebacker. And you know what? Let's cut through the crap for 1 second, too. What does this say about Aaron Henderson and where...
According to Frazier, it says nothing.
You know what, and I love Les, and Les cannot, for his own sake, come out and tell us the truth here, but seriously, we've watched Aaron Henderson compete for that weak side job pretty much unopposed all training camp. Now, all of a sudden, you're seeing guys come in, and you're seeing a lineman move to linebacker. To me, this speaks volumes about the fact of where this team feels they are at this position.
And it's already a part-time position. Weak side linebacker in this defense is, you're on the field maybe 50% of snaps, and now suddenly you're going to take 10%, 20% of those snaps and give them to somebody else, even a few snaps a game, that could be a substantial amount. Because there were games last season where Ben Lieber was on the field 10 to 15 plays.
Do you think, too, in the Vikings front office now, Tom, there are some people looking around saying, you know what, Ben Lieber got, what, $2 million plus from the Rams?
1.25, I thought it was.
Okay, whatever it was, do you think that they're saying perhaps we should have gone back there and tried to get this guy back? Because Lieber was a very serviceable player. He didn't get that much money. And I just think it's really interesting we're this late in camp and this move is now being tried. If this move had been tried from day one at camp, I would have said, okay, I get it. This surprised me.
There's no way to anticipate exactly how the market was going to settle. There was a lot of feeling that there was going to be the first tier free agents who would get paid, second tier guys would not get paid. But boy, 1.25 or whatever it was, in fact, with incentives and whatnot for Ben Lieber, it's not much. And what we always looked at was the later the lockout went, I thought guys like Ben Lieber and Pat Williams, players like that would come back on one-year deals, play in the same system, the one you're familiar with,
that's what Ben
and then look for big money later.
Right? I mean, that's basically what Ben got from the Rams. So
but the fact that the Vikings weren't interested.
And it would have been easy for him to come back here. Here's the other question with Griffen, too. Look at Griffen. You remember last year, we saw him quite a bit around the locker room. This guy was not in the best of shape. Now, coming from me, I know it seems somewhat hypocritical, but in all honesty, this was a guy who looked to be sort of doughy. I think it's really interesting that they're moving this guy to linebacker. Either they are, one, convinced he's in a lot better shape, or two, convinced they can get him in a lot better shape quickly.
He's still a big guy, but he does move well with the size that he has. He has a very quick first step. I can see the positive parts of it. It is different, though. Every defensive lineman will say that, you know, oh, I've done coverage, I've dropped in zone blitzes. That's not the same thing.
Totally
there's a lot different thing if you are able to, because the offenses are going to be able to isolate the guys that they want to. But again, if they end up using him for 5-10 snaps a game in a very specific package where most of the time he's going to be rushing, I can see it. I can see where that would end up being a benefit to them. It's almost like switching to a 3-4 in a sort of a nickel defense.
This also, I think, speaks a bit about Christian Ballard and the fact that they like what the 4th-round pick from Iowa has done. He's looked very good inside. In fact, sounds like he's going to get a chance to play some end in the final preseason game on Thursday. I think this is I think if this is bad news for Aaron Henderson, it's good news for Christian Ballard, and the fact the Vikings have some faith in the fact that they can potentially use this guy as a replacement at times in sub packages for Brian Robinson at left end, as well as inside in that nickel defense when they need him to rush.
I think it's good news for Brian Robinson too, in that suddenly maybe those snaps that Griffen might have gotten in place of Robinson, he ends up taking in place of a weak side linebacker. So maybe they're finding some different ways. Some other injuries, Kevin Williams being back, wasn't exactly going 100% today,
No.
but he's on the field. They're looking at him. Lorenzo Booker with the back injury, that's one that I have a little bit of a question about, just because the way that he went down, it did look like he got shot. He crumpled to the ground
he didn't get touched,
without being touched. Whenever you see a guy go down and he's not touched, that's when it's an ACL or it's an Achilles. Apparently his back, I don't know what you can pop the same way that you pop an Achilles. That's what it looked like.
You know what? One wrong move with a guy like that, it's a problem. We also should mention, cuts have been made now. Vikings cut 10 players. They go from 90 to 80 players. The Vikings have, according to Pro Football Talk, the least amount of salary cap room in the National Football League. I am saying this because I am imploring you folks who are sending us notes on Twitter about the Vikings signing Chester Taylor if he's let go, which we don't even know is going to happen. Everybody who comes free, people want to know if the Vikings are going to sign him. Right now, the Vikings can't sign most of these guys. So while there might be 1 or 2 changes Saturday after all the cuts are made here, don't look for the Vikings to go out and get a bunch of guys who are cut.
Yeah, Chester Taylor, for one thing, can't play anymore. We saw that in Chicago last year.
I
don't buy that he can play anymore. But, all right, Andre Garrod was cut because his salary was too high and they couldn't even trade him. Would that guy be an upgrade over some of the guys they've got on the interior? I'd say yes, but they would have to somehow free up money. They're not going to get a deal done with Greenway, I don't think, before Saturday. They're not going to get a deal done, definitely not, with Adrian Peterson before Saturday. You can trim money if you cut a guy like a Heath Farwell or a Greg Camarillo, who have a cap number up in the $1.7 million range. But even that, you still, Rob Brzezinski's good. I don't know if he's that good to be able to get a starting caliber player who ends up on the street under their cap right now.
Yeah, and
without restructuring something.
And if they try to, it's going to be like one guy. There's not going to be a bunch of guys who come in here, veterans the fans have heard of. It might be one guy. It's going to take some time, but I agree with you. Before Saturday, Greenway's not going to get done. Peterson certainly is not going to get done. As far as we know, there's been very little contact with Peterson's folks at all. So essentially, the roster the Vikings have right now, which will go down to 53 on Saturday, those 53 players are going to be here. They're here already. They're going to be here. You're not going to see, I don't think, a ton of guys come in. No way.
Saturday is going to be fun, though, right?
Saturday is going to be very interesting. I think it'll be a busy day for us after I get done with my show with Patrick Royce.
And before I do my show at night.
Yeah, I think we'll be working quite a bit on the cuts, and then what? We'll be on the air Saturday talking about it.
We'll be on it Saturday night. I think 6 p.m. We'll be out there breaking down all the roster moves.
And by the way,
be a good time.
Don't forget, Judd and Fun begins Tuesday, September 6th on 1500 ESPN, 9 to noon. Myself, Joe Anderson, just want to throw that plug in.
That's so shameless.
Oh, I'm completely shameless now. I'm in radio. I got to throw it out there.
That's a good point. He's Judd. I'm Tom. We'll see you.